Hey, I wanted to put up a video about leaving a job and leaving a boss, supervisor behind, who I think has come to some kind of conclusion that she's narcissistic and probably ADHD at the same time. Well, I know she's ADHD. She admitted it to me when she first hired me. I only lasted in this position less than 2 years. It was like a year and 7 months or something like that. It was as long as I could take it. And the reason why I wanted to make this video is because, and this isn't a situation where I was employed in higher ed, okay? So it's not like a corporate job where somebody's going to be always trying to be like the superior manager to climb the corporate ladder, and they're going to do everything they can to, humiliate you at work and call you out in front of people in meetings and stuff like that, okay? That kind of thing didn't happen because we don't have meetings and things like that in higher ed, okay? In my situation, I knew that this woman was trying to destroy my reputation behind my back. I had heard her over a recording at least a couple of times telling people, putting me down, putting down my intelligence generally, my ability to perform my job, these types of things. And the reason why I was able to hear this over a recording is because I monitored classrooms in the higher ed setting. Like the AV in these classrooms, and a couple of times she walked into classrooms and I had my headphones on so I could see what she was doing and I could hear her. And another time she did the same thing with a vendor, and I was taking too long to log into Microsoft for her, and so she had to talk to him about how she couldn't understand why this was so difficult for me and these sorts of things. She's saying it in a really mean way. I mean, I was having trouble because I was trying to log into the computer and there was all this Microsoft junk on it that I had to try to get past, all these pop-ups and login issues and things like this. It's because the Microsoft licenses hadn't been updated. So it had nothing to do with how fast or how slow I can log into a computer. And it so happened that the vendor was with me and he had his speakerphone on, and so I heard this whole discussion of her telling him, I don't understand why this is so difficult for her, and blah blah blah. And then she goes, oh, am I on speakerphone? I confronted her about that conversation like several months later. I don't know why I waited so long. I should have marched right back into my office and let her have it, because that's the kind of person I am. But I had a lot riding on this job and I just couldn't really. I tried to get over it, and I'm pretty good at starting off every day in a good mood and on a new chapter, and looking at the bright side every morning and really going in and trying to make things work and this sort of thing. I'm always willing to do that. I go to work every day on time, and I try to be pleasant to everybody around me. And that's another thing. In this position, I worked with professors, one-on-one, alone. I often came into the classrooms to help them fix technology, all of these things. And I had many professor friends, and many good times with these professors, many laughs, just really good working relationships with them. And I wasn't the only one who pointed out that this woman that I was working with had personality issues. There were a few people who I confided in that I didn't like working with her, and they confided in me that they could see some of the issues that I was complaining about. And part of the situation in my position, too, was that why it was so difficult, and one of the reasons why I couldn't even last 2 years is because my office and her office, my desk was in her office. She was very controlling. She wouldn't let me, I don't know, are these too shiny? I have cheap glasses. You probably can't see me very good, but anyway, she was very controlling, and she wouldn't. She was micromanaging my every move, and it was driving me crazy. And a couple of times, like after I'd been there like 4 or 5 months, I started to ask her for my own office, and she said no. She said there is no space for your office. There was a space across the hall. There was a little tiny office, and I'm a small person, and I could fit in there perfectly. And in fact, it had been an office for some time for our student assistants, and then they were moved to a bigger like control room as we started to expand our rooms and the role that we played in this college. And so that office had remained empty. Over the winter, I came down with, well, it was like spring, I guess. I came down with COVID, and I was really sick. And I filed, I had long haul. And so I filed for a protections, right? Because I wasn't able to run to the rooms and fix things as quickly as she wanted me to. And there was a couple times when I couldn't like make sense of what was going on in a room, and what was actually happening in the room, like for a malfunction for audio video, was actually really quite obvious. And we had gotten in an argument about it, because it was pouring rain, and I told her that I didn't want to run over to this building. And I was really sick, and I was trying to recover from COVID, but she made me run over anyway in the rain, so I was mad. And anyway, so I had to file for protections. And in that filing, I asked to be in my own office because of coughing all over everything. Like, I went back to work earlier than I should have because she was emailing me every day. Like, she would say, "Oh, are you feeling better? Are you feeling better?" Like, but it was just a veiled, like, harassment to get me to come back to work. She didn't care whether or not I was feeling better. Not really, And so anyway, that was the only time I ever got to work by myself. And as soon as I started to feel better, and I started to like the long haul. Like I had long haul, it was really obvious. Like I couldn't even barely talk. And I had such brain fog. Okay, so then, and I'm very articulate. So when I started to get my faculties back, then she just called me into her office. She's like, "I want you to move back into here." And I'm like, "Please, just let me have my own space, And she wouldn't. So, all right, so I went back into my old desk and sat down, and this is about the 1 year mark, and got to work and tried to make the most of it and tried to be friendly with her. And, well, the point of this video that I wanted to tell you is just like some things that I had wished that I'd noticed, or I noticed them in the beginning, but I was desperate for a job. And so I really was like, this was a pretty good job, the way it was described. And it had good benefits and paid good, and it had a good title. And so I was like, okay, I'll apply. I don't think I'll get it, but I'll apply. All right, and so there were these things right away that she did that I noticed that I want to tell you about. And I'm sorry if like some of the things that I mentioned to you are going to make certain people feel offended. Because you might have these behaviors, or you might exhibit these traits. And I don't mean it to be like, an attack on individuals who have those individual traits. I'm just bringing it up because they were big things to me that I wish that I had paid attention to with this particular person, because these traits were very telling about how her personality worked, okay? And if it hadn't been like, that I was noticing the narcissism, like I would not call out these traits, okay? But I'm just calling them out because she had them all, and I really do attribute them to narcissism. So let me just start. Okay, when I went in for the interview, first of all, she didn't check any of my references. I know she didn't. And I went in and had the interview, and I went into her office and talked to her afterwards, like a little chat. I think I was just getting my jacket. And she said, I want to hire you. She goes, I can't just hire you right on the spot, but I'm going to put in for you. So I was like, well, okay, great, and I don't think at that time that I realized that my office was going to be in her office. And like, we're sitting like 5 feet away from each other, really, or just a little bit more than that, all day, every day, okay, with this person who's friggin' crazy. All right. So right there, like, she's desperate to get somebody in there to work with her, and she will just take anybody who walks in off the street, who can put 2 sentences together, and will hire them. All right. And the way she put it was, I want to hire you before somebody else snatches you up. Okay, now this all sounds very nice, right? Like, who wouldn't be flattered? I was really flattered because I was leaving another job where I felt undervalued and underappreciated. And I know it seems weird, like I left one bad job, I got into another bad job, it must be me. No, it's not. Honestly, it's not me. Okay. Felt really contrived, like an act, like somebody had read a book, like if you want to impress somebody, like people love to hear their name, that kind of thing. Okay. And when she started doing that, and when I noticed it, I'm like, I already knew that there was something weird about her, because the way she talked to me was contrived and scripted. Like she didn't have her own ideas about what to say and her own original thoughts. Okay? So why is that? Because she's not capable, right? So I wouldn't say she's a sociopath or a psychopath or whatever. But there's some kind of disconnect there, to where she doesn't access her own emotions and her own feelings of empathy for other people. Or like she knows there's a disconnect between how she can understand other people. So what she's doing is she's imitating things, or she's looking up something in a book, right? Because she can't think of how to be like naturally nice to somebody, or just, read the room and just be like normal. Okay, now another thing like that, very similar to that. I'm telling you all these things so that you can watch out for these behaviors on your own, okay? The next thing she did that I noticed a lot, and this is when in the first couple of weeks I started to realize like I was going to be in trouble in this job, like getting along with her, and I was starting to recognize right away. Like that's the thing too, like if you are stuck with a narcissistic boss and an ADHD boss, you will figure it out quickly, okay? There won't take a slow build up. There'll be things right away, all right? Within the first couple of weeks, you'll notice. And I just feel sorry for you. And I think if you get in someplace, if you're desperate and you have to keep the job, keep it. But what you could do is, like, if you start to see these signs right away in the first week or so, just say, look, I got another job offer, and there's things about this job I just don't feel that are quite right for me. And before I get any further into this with you, I think while you're still maybe interviewing, you should find another candidate, and I'm going to take this other offer. Do that. Do it. Don't do what I did. All right, so the next thing that she started doing was she would repeat phrases over and over again, like little sayings. You know how like a teenager will say, or what was it that they say? Right? I remember when that happened when I was in high school. Like one of my teenager friends started saying right. And so they'd say it all the time. Like, like how we say like now, right? But everybody does. But no, it would be like some little odd saying, okay? And she'd get this saying, I'd hear her say it like once on a Monday, and then she'd say that same saying like 5 times that week, or 6 or 7 times that week. Like one thing she would say was like, oh, he flipped that email to somebody else. Oh, you flipped that call to somebody, or you flipped that work, or they flipped this aspect of the job, or I told him to do this and he flipped it to somebody else, okay? Like, I hate that kind of thing. And she would it doesn't sound like anything really wrong with that. I'm trying to think of like other little phrases that she would, I can't remember any other ones, like, but just little phrases like that, okay? And she would say them over and over again, okay? And like, why is that, right? Because it's a part of the lack of connection, right, with your own intellectual processes, the ability to relate. You recognize that you're not relating to other people, right? So you find some little thing that makes you feel secure in the way that you're relating, and even maybe makes you feel like, hey, that's a cool little saying, like cool beans. Oh my God, if she had said that like 10 times, I'd have lost. You wouldn't notice it, or ordinarily, you'd think you wouldn't notice it, okay? But when all of these things started adding up, okay? Now, in the process of this, okay, those are just little weird things, right? Like, anybody can just live with that. It's not that bad. But what I started to notice was that, like, she was very micromanaging, okay? So she would come over to my desk, and if she was showing me how to do something with the software, she'd stand like a foot behind me, and she'd be like, okay, put your cursor here. Okay, wait, that's a misspelling. Okay, wait, type it in like this. Okay, now up here, right? Okay, like, all right, wait, move your mouse like this. Like, just, like, she would have like a million little instructions. Like, if I started to spell something in a search bar wrong, like, I'm going to recognize it myself, okay? I don't need her to tell me, like, oh, you spelled that wrong. Get that up there. You know, like, as I'm doing it. Like, maybe if it were afterwards and I was sitting there going, I don't understand why I'm not getting the address, right? No, it wasn't like that. Like, I would say I was making a list of classes or something like that. She'd print out the whole list of classes, and I would tell her, I've made a list of the classes. It's in draft form. I'm going to work on it some more this week. Okay? Okay. She'd pull that list off. Like, this would be a list of 200 classes, you know, and it was just in draft state, and of course there would be a few misspellings there. Like, we have all kinds of weird names for professors, like their last names, like spellings and stuff. Not just Smith. So there would be and there'd be new professors and everything, and sometimes I'd have like a misspelling, and she'd come over like the next morning with her list, and she'd be like, can you pull this list up? So I'd be like, okay, and I'd pull up the list, and she'd be like, see this right here? This is an I, it needs to be an A. And she would go through, like, she couldn't just hand me the paper with the red marks and say, fix these, right, and then go back to her desk and sit down. Like, she shouldn't do that anyway, because it was just in draft form, and I don't need her to tell me that I've misspelled something. When I put permanent work in there and I say I'm done, there ain't no misspellings, because I've checked everything like 10 times, okay? There are no mistakes. There are no errors. When it's finally published and we're going to be working for it, that work is absolutely 100%, you can bet your life on it, it is correct, right? But I go through stages, you know, and I check things like 5 times. You have to do this in that particular position. You can't have misspellings or mess up a schedule or record something on the wrong day, this kind of thing. So it has to be right. And I am detail oriented, and I know that. So she would do that, you know, constantly. Like, every time I turned around, she was standing behind me doing this, okay? The other thing she would do is, like, somebody would call on the phone, and I would pick it up, and it would be a professor or something, and he'd be asking me something about such a room, like a recording he'd scheduled, something, and she'd start talking behind me, like, to the professor, while I'm trying to talk to him. You know, tell him blah, 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 and she'd be right behind me, like, or at her desk. This is why she couldn't stand to have me out of her sight, right? Because she wanted to do this, like, micromanage me. And I could not, she would be talking like that, and I could not hear the person I was talking to, and there is nothing ruder, okay? When my kids used to do that to me when they were little, this sounds awful, but when I was little, my mother used to get out a rubber spatula out of the drawer, and she'd just go like this with the spatula, and I'd run. My kids I only had to take that spatula out once and threaten to spank them. Like, one kid I did spank, the other one never needed to spank. They would just run, and they never did it again. I'll tell you what. But I finally, like, turned to her, like, after I'd been there months, and she had done it, like, 10 times, and I'm just like, can you please stop? And that's the thing, too. Like, she could not accept me asking her for any kind of boundary or allowance whatsoever. Like, she almost pissed her pants when I told her I had filed that ADA, and that I had requested the office, right, and that she had to give it to me. She was just, like, her eyes rolled back in her head, okay? All right. No, she would not accept any kind of feedback. Like, she might for a day, but then the next day, she would be right back at it. She would do the same thing with my email. I would send an email to somebody and CC her on it, and she would send a duplicate email, basically the same email to somebody saying the same things, but maybe like adding one little tiny detail that I might have forgotten, you know? Totally just invalidating my efforts at communicating and doing my job. She never validated what I did, ever. All right. But in the beginning, these are the early things that I wanted to tell you. So she stood behind my back and she did that kind of thing, right? And she, right away with the phone, I noticed that, okay? And here's the other thing, okay, very important thing. Like, she was only interested in what she had to say. And I don't know if this was the narcissism or the ADHD. I can't figure it out, because I think she had both, right? And she did admit to me early on that she had ADHD. She only mentioned it briefly and never brought it up again. But you'll know if you go over to somebody's desk and they've got a ton of fucking lists, like, of things that they need to do, that's, you know that they got ADHD, and that's their cope, okay? That's what they've been taught to do. All right, so, yeah, and that was another thing that I noticed, and I noticed that right away, and all of this was starting to come, like, abundantly clear. Like, I've dealt with people very close to me who have ADHD, and I won't date somebody who has ADHD. I don't have many friends that I hang out with that are ADHD. It's an annoyance for me. I don't like it, and I just would rather be alone, okay, to tell you the truth. Sorry if that offends people. But at least I'm not going out and attacking them. I'm just saying I'd rather be by myself, because it's just too much work for me to be in a relationship like that. Anyway, what was the other thing I was going to say, the really big thing? Oh, okay. So, right, I noticed the lists right away, and I don't know whether this is ADHD or narcissism, but, like, she's only interested in what's going on in her life and what she has to say about something, right? So her desk was against one wall, mine was against the other, and she would turn around and talk to me, right? And she would tell me something like, she was homeschooling, and one of her kids is, like, ADHD too, and is not doing good and needs, like, help in school, and kid's not getting it. She won't put them in public school because she's too controlling, all right? Just straight up, full stop. I swear it, that's why. And I'll tell you another story some other time about how I know that, okay? But anyway, she'd turn around and tell me something like that, right? And so I'd start to say, well, there's a supplement that you can take that you can give to kids that are good, like, to increase their attention span, or something like omega-6 I was talking to her about, or something. Or I was telling her something about my kids, or try to respond to her, or whatever it was that she brought up. And before I could get, like, 2 sentences in to respond to her or to contribute to the conversation, she would turn her head around and her body and face her computer, and she would just give me a very, like, minimal response. Oh, really? Oh, okay. And then right back to what she was doing. One time I was asking her about the house that she bought, because she had just moved into a house like 3 years before, and I was asking her about the neighborhood or what the house was like or something. This is that, like, I would try to have like normal conversations with her that were short, and she couldn't do it. It would be a long, drawn out thing with her talking. Like 95% of the conversation would be her talking, and it didn't end, okay? I will tell you, like, people used to come into our office, and they would come in to tell her something, and they'd want to leave, right? And she would just talk their effing ears off. And people would have to be like, I've got to go, to get her to stop. And I'd be walking out, or somebody be walking out, they'd be 2 doors down the hall, and she's still talking to them. She'd be like yelling to them. If you see this kind of stuff in the very beginning, give your notice, because staying with this person with these kinds of behaviors is gonna be career suicide for you, because it's gonna only get worse, right? Because these people are unhappy too, and they take their crap out on you, and they will make sure that you are failing all the time and that you're not gonna get ahead, all right? And they will not promote you. And they will not, give you good reviews, no matter what you do. So get out while you can. All right, so those were 2 really big things. Like, she never paid any attention to anything I had to say. She made it very obvious that she didn't care about anything going on in my life. She only talked about herself, and she only took interest in herself. I asked her about the house thing. For like 50 minutes telling me about every single renovation in her house that she made. She got out pictures. She showed me her pictures. She went on and on. She told me about how they chopped down the trees in the backyard. Like, I don't want to talk to anybody at work this much about anything. I want to go in and do my job, and I'll say, hi, Susie, like, did you have a good time this weekend? Or how was that thing that you were going to do? Okay, Susie, bye. That's the only way I want to socialize at work. She would come over and talk to me for 50 minutes straight about her house, okay? And then she'd start, when she was finally done, like maybe the phone would ring or something, or she'd walk over to her desk, and I would say something about, oh yeah, like my apartment, has, I just started turning on the heat again, it's getting cold. No. It's just anything like that. Like, I would try to think of something to say, and she would just before I could even get it out of my mouth, have her back to me. She was not interested, and she couldn't listen. Okay, here is another biggest clue ever that you are in trouble with somebody, that they're going to be a problem supervisor for you. You couldn't get a word in edgewise with this woman, ever. You couldn't say 3 words without her interrupting you. Sometimes she'd finish your sentences, but usually not, because you can't read what she's going to say. So I shouldn't say that. She wouldn't finish your sentences, but she'd finish the conversation for you. Like, she'd put an end to whatever you were going to say and move on to something else. But here's the thing, like, you couldn't, no matter what anybody tried to talk to her about, no matter who came in our office, no matter what they were coming in to talk to her about, you couldn't get 3 words out of your mouth before she was interrupting you. And she would just do it and do it and do it. Everything you said. I remember a dean came in one time and started talking about some kind of renovation he wanted in a room or something, accommodation or something. A dean, all right, is coming in to talk to her. And the entire time, every sentence that came out of his mouth, she interrupted him. She talked over him. She didn't hear what he had to say. And he's like, okay, I've got to go. She kept him standing there. She kept him blah, 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 blah. He's finally like, okay, I got to go. And he turned around and walked out. All the time. If somebody is constantly interrupting you, now I know that's ADHD, but it's also narcissism, because they don't think that anything you have to say is important. All right, okay, so I dealt with this those are just a couple of the things. Like, maybe in my next video I'll tell you about all of the different events that happened and how horrible they were, and why I finally just had to leave and I got another job. And Lord knows, I don't know, like, I haven't met these people either, and I don't know how it's going to go. I could be jumping out of one frying pan right into another. But the other thing that she used to do, like, she was very overweight. Okay, now this is the part that people are going to get mad about. She was very overweight, and she would say things like, "This is how I was born." And it could be, like, you know, but you also have, like, if you have the genetics to carry extra weight, I can understand that. But a lot of times when you have the genetics, you also have the parents feeding you total junk, okay? And you learn that is your diet, okay? This woman, she would eat at her desk all day long. Crunch, 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 crunch. Everything you can imagine. Like, when we got into Halloween season and there was candy all over the office, she would just have, like, whatever you could imagine. Potato chips, candy, wrappers, apples, everything. Like, and it would be unending. If people brought in donuts, she would have, like, one or two, right? And then she'd get another one, and I was told that she would go into, like, another room, like a kitchen room, and sit in there and eat the donut, like, or try to eat the donut really fast. She was a binge eater, okay? Now, I'm sorry if you have binge eating, okay, problems with that. And I'm not just criticizing you for having that one problem or for being overweight or whatever. I'm trying to explain, like, a set of traits that characterize this woman who had ADHD and narcissism and whatever, like, compulsive disorder, to where she could not control her behaviors. And that's exactly it. Like, I would ask her, like, please stop talking to me while I'm on the phone, you know? Stop doing that. I even said to her, like, it's really rude, you know? And she would stop for one day, but the next day she'd be right back at it, okay? It's an impulse, no ability to control her impulses, and she would just eat all day. And, like, I would take my lunch out to a different room, like a cafeteria, and sit at a table and eat like a civilized person. So, like, people aren't seeing my food go everywhere and hearing me chomp on food and, like, smelling my lunch, you know, all of this stuff. She had nothing like that. Nothing. Like, no understanding. Like, I don't want to sit there and listen to her crunching down apples, potato chips, you know, watching her eat donuts, unwrapping candies. Like, the sound of all of that was just unbearable. Unfucking bearable. Okay, that's the end of this thing. If you see any of those characteristics in your supervisor when you go in for an interview, like the love bombing at the beginning of your job, and then the overbearing presence in your physical space, the micromanaging, okay, the constant interruption to everything, the zero empathy or interest in anything that you are doing or what's going on in your life or who you are, zero interest in that, and like a person who can't understand when to end a conversation, like lacking in that ability, and they're an impulsive eater. These are all things that are, I swear to you, you're going to have big problems down the road with this person. So gather up your things, give your notice, and get the hell out as fast as you can. That's my advice. That's my PSA.